Retired Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin is on the phone. He served in the U.S. Armed Forces for 36 years, including the 1st Delta Force Team, which he later commanded. General Boykin served under President Bush as Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. Now retired, General Boykin is Executive Vice President at the Family Research Council in Washington. General Boykin, welcome back to True News.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yes, sir. Several weeks ago, I had a Texas veterinarian on the program who operates, he lives there along the border with Mexico. He described South Texas as a war zone. He said ranchers have deserted their properties because of fear of being harmed by criminals coming into the border. General, I mean, you've been in combat. Is this what we have happening now on the Texas-Arizona border? Do we have a war zone?
Yes, we absolutely do. And talk to people that live, for example, in the major city of El Paso, and they will tell you that they hear firefights going on. They have rounds landing over in their neighborhoods, rounds that are being fired right there on the border between, in most cases, warring criminal factions or warring drug cartels. But look down in the Tucson sector at a place like Nogales, and what you'll find is that there is a pattern of finding dismembered bodies that have been thrown out on the streets of Nogales. So is there a war going on that border right now? You bet there certainly is, and it has taken a toll on the inhabitants down there. The legal residents of Texas and Arizona are really putting up with a lot down there on that border now.
4 or 5 years ago, we started hearing reports that the drug cartels were beheading people. And, when I first read it, I was like, this is so bizarre. Why would drug cartels behead people? Well, I think it's pretty obvious where they picked up the technique.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody's there working with the drug cartels.
Yeah, see, up until probably less than a decade ago, and really more 3 to 5 years ago, the drug cartels tried to stay under the radar. They didn't want to draw attention. They wanted to be able to move their drugs and all that. But then Hezbollah, Hamas, and Al-Qaeda started infiltrating into Central America, primarily down in what we call the tri-border region, and then working their way up into Mexico. And they started integrating with the drug cartels, and that's when the behavior and the modus operandi of the drug cartels began to change. And that's when they started getting the beheadings and the total dismemberments of bodies and a far more radical, brutal kind of thing, the kind of stuff you see ISIS doing right now, you started seeing the drug cartels doing, and it is to strike fear and to intimidate, which is, again, the influence of Middle East Islamic terrorist organizations on the drug cartels. They've convinced them that this is far more effective and acts more rapidly to try and create fear and intimidate people with this kind of brutality.
General, in early summer 2014, we saw two things happen along the border. Number one, there was this sudden, quote, humanitarian crisis where tens of thousands of people were walking over the border. We were told that little children as young as 4 had walked from Guatemala all the way across Central America and Mexico into Texas and Arizona. And the second thing we saw simultaneously was a stand down by the U.S. government in enforcing immigration laws and enforcing the border. Do you think this is a coincidence, or do you think this is a coordinated strategy by the Obama regime?
No, I believe that it was absolutely a coordinated strategy. Look, I've talked to a lot of people that have a lot of inside knowledge on what was going on here, and the Obama administration, as you probably have already heard, the Obama administration was making preparations for this huge influx that we started seeing in the early part of the year. They were going out and trying to find people that would would literally be babysitters for infants and that type of thing. They were trying to find places that they could use to bring them to. Right here in my state of Virginia, in a little town called Lawrenceville, we actually had some members of the Department of Homeland Security fess up to the fact that they had been expecting this for quite some time. So I think it was very orchestrated, and those 4-year-olds didn't walk across the border from Guatemala into Mexico. They were ushered in, they were driven in, they were taken in by various means, and they were exploited. They were put on these trains that came to the border here, and then what did we as a nation do? What we did was we restricted the Border Patrol from being able to protect the border. And everybody's focused on the fact that these were young children and all. What nobody tells you about is all of the thugs that came across the border at the same time when we wouldn't let the Border Patrol protect the border. Thugs and terrorists and hardcore criminals that came across that border, and gang members. So this has been orchestrated, and it's just as phony as it can be.
General, if the Obama administration orchestrated the invasion of illegal immigrants into the country, and they ordered a stand down of enforcement of our laws, in my opinion, that's not only criminal, that's treasonous behavior.
It is treasonous behavior, and this is a lawless regime. This is an absolutely lawless regime. And Andrew McCarthy has written a book called Faithless Execution, in which he talks about the lawlessness of the Obama administration. The problem is there's no leadership in our Congress that is willing to take him to task, to hold him accountable for his lawlessness. You see, under the provision for high crimes and misdemeanors, McCarthy makes the case that this president could be impeached. But nobody is going to do it. The Republicans certainly aren't, and obviously the Democrats wouldn't touch that for anything. But there is a lawlessness here, and this invasion that you just talked about, this orchestrated invasion, really was all about establishing a voter bloc that would be in perpetuity, would be a bloc for the Democrats. And it's about Chicago politics, in my view. It's about how they've operated there for a century.
It looks like Mr. Obama is going to postpone until after the November elections his executive decree granting amnesty to millions of people. I am amazed that nobody in Washington is challenging his authority to grant amnesty to anybody. General, if the President of the United States claims legal authority to grant U.S. citizenship to people, then reason says he also has the authority to remove citizenship from people. Yeah. I mean, what do we have here? This is a dictatorship.
Yeah, you have an imperial president. I don't want to be too evangelical, but there's a story in the Bible where the Israelites asked for a king, and God said, no, you don't want a king. You really don't want one. And they said, oh, yes, we do. Well, that's what America did. We asked for a king, and we got a king, and we got him twice. And that is because Americans are just absolutely asleep at the switch. They're not paying attention to what's happening in this country. They're uninformed because they're living in an atmosphere of amusement. That's what they want to do, is be amused. Amuse meaning to think, and amuse without thinking, and that's where we are. And as a result of that, we wind up with a president that has gotten in under false promises, gotten in by promising everybody, free bubble up and a glass of champagne, and then has not fulfilled any of his promises other than the promises he's made to the LGBT community, as well as the climate change types, and of course the Marxists, like George Soros. He's fulfilled those promises, but with regards to the promises to the average American, they've not been fulfilled. They've been broken. And that's what this administration is just a series of broken promises.
Why are the Republicans so docile? Obama's he's eyeball deep in scandals. Why are the Republicans so docile?
Yeah, look, the Republican Party has a bad rap of being racist. Does it not make sense that the last thing that the Republicans want to do is go down in history as having impeached the first black president? It's a tremendous, it was a brilliant strategy from the very beginning, going all the way back to 2008 when he was elected. It was just a brilliant strategy. We underestimate the left. We underestimate the Democrats, the liberals, the progressives, whatever you want to call them. They have brilliant strategies, and they have the funding and the resources to execute those strategies, and that was part of the strategy, was that the Republicans will not make a serious challenge to this guy because they don't want to be, the party that impeached the black president.
Well, they ought to go down in history as the party that impeached the first red president. Because General, he's red. You know this man. You were in intelligence in the military. You know this guy's a commie.
Yeah. Well,
if he isn't a commie, he's the closest thing I've ever seen to a Marxist communist in the White House. And we have a revolution taking place.
About that. Look at who he's surrounded himself with, all of which are Marxists. They're hardcore Marxists. Well, people say, what's the difference between Marxism and communism? Well, it's really essentially the same. It's just when you declare that you're officially an atheist society, then you're officially a communist. Up to the point that you do that, you probably fall more on the side of being a Marxist. But I think that you have to look objectively at the policies of the administration and realize that they are right out of, Karl Marx's book, the Communist Manifesto. He outlines exactly how you move a society to being Marxist, and we're doing it. We're doing all of those things with the redistribution of wealth and the suppressing the opposition and infringing on freedom of speech and so forth. Go down the line.
Mm-hmm.
You see it all.
Alexander Golitsyn, a Soviet defector, wrote the book Perestroika Deception, published in 1995. He said in 1959, 1960, the Soviet Union adopted a plan to capture the mindset of the West, and transform it into a Marxist communist mindset. And he said perestroika would be used to deceive the West, that they would put down their guard and accept it's essentially brainwashing. That book is eerily prophetic, General, because we're like living it out in real time right now.
Yeah, we are. He saw it coming, and he understood the mentality of the Marxist model, so to speak. He understood that, and we are seeing it unfold right now. A lot of people don't understand that things like gun control, that's all part of the Marxist model, for example. Remember when the 2009 memo came out identifying future threats as being right-wing Christian groups, pro-life groups, Second Amendment groups, and returning veterans? What was that all about as part of the Marxist model? It's all about alienating and discrediting the very people that might stand up and fight against these kinds of things. And so we're following that model pretty rigidly. And then you look at class warfare. We're divided into so many classes today. That's what the Occupy Wall Street was. 99% against the 1%. It's creating the class warfare that Karl Marx wrote about in the Communist Manifesto, and then pitting them against each other under the concept of one side being the proletariat and the other side being the bourgeoisie, which is also a false narrative. Where's the middle class in all of that?
Is somebody using psyops on the American people?
Absolutely. There's more influence operations going on in this country. First of all, the Islamists are running an influence campaign, trying to change our thinking. And look, you saw the evidence of that when the president stood up last week and said, ISIS is not Islam. You know, that's an influence campaign. That's influence, and that's brainwashing the American people, trying to get them to believe that nonsense. But you see that also with the Marxists. The Marxists are doing exactly the same thing. And then the LGBT lobby is doing the same thing. They're bombarding us with this, with this messaging that is really about changing the way we think, changing our attitudes. It's called marriage equality. Brilliant strategy.
The communists always said that they would change the meaning of words.
Absolutely, and they're doing it. They're masters at it, and we don't fight back very effectively.
General, about 2 weeks ago, an elderly retired woman, I think she was in her 80s. This is in London, in a nice middle-class neighborhood. This dear lady was in her garden, tending to her flowers, and a Muslim man came into her garden with a machete and beheaded her in the afternoon. Did you hear about this story?
No.
See, there's a total news blackout in the United States.
Yep.
An elderly woman in London was beheaded in the middle of the afternoon, and nobody knows about it.
Yep.
This is the type of propaganda that's going on, where there's certain news that they make sure we never hear.
Now, think about what you just said. The only reason that the beheading of the two journalists and the aid worker were actually became headline news was because ISIS put it on YouTube, and then the media had no choice. This wasn't on YouTube, therefore they deliberately ignored it, and they're doing that all over the place.
How does ISIS have a YouTube account? I don't know how that works. I'm trying to figure this out, how these Muslims have these YouTube accounts, because Christians, in the United States, they put something on their Facebook page or Twitter about the Bible, and their account is shut down right away. But ISIS has an account, and they can put beheading videos there. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, and I can't answer the question.
I'm just wondering. Hey, General, several weeks ago, two other retired generals were here on this program, General Paul Valley and Lieutenant General Tom McInerney, and they both had some very troubling things to say, and both of them said that they believe that the United States is quickly moving to a place where military commanders are going to have to make a decision about whether they are going to honor the oath that they swore to defend the Constitution against enemies foreign and domestic. Are we that close?
Yeah, I think we are. Listen, I tell you, I just did Fox and Friends, and we talked a little bit about this with folks there on Fox News. I think what is far more likely is that these general officers, these admirals, are going to be forced into making a decision as to whether they're going to resign in protest and make a big issue of the fact that they can no longer support the policies of this administration, or whether they're going to compromise their principles and continue to support these feckless, dangerous, inept policies of this administration, particularly as it impacts on the warfighting and the lives of the sons and daughters of America.
What do you think about Mr. Obama's plans to send 3,000 soldiers to West Africa to deal with Ebola? Is that a dangerous plan?
It is an absolute misuse of the U.S. military. I am so opposed to that. I want you to think about this. At the same time that we have a military that has been stretched so thin that it's impacting readiness, it's impacting families, I mean, the disintegration of the family is incredible right now as a result of 13 years of war. We're cutting their budgets. We're giving them pink slips while they are in a combat zone. We're saying, when you come home, by the way, we're going to put you out of the Army or the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines. And then we're adding another mission for 3,000 of these young men and women to go and do something that the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines were not designed to do. Their mission is to fight and win wars, not pandemics.
Are you telling me that soldiers on the combat field are being given pink slips that their job is over when they leave the battlefield?
That's right. They're in Afghanistan, and they're being told that they have a termination date at which they will know their services will no longer be used. That's while they're in a combat zone.
Boy, that'll really motivate you to fight.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. That's the callousness of this administration.
General, not only the stretching our troops beyond their endurance regarding this Ebola assignment, but the danger of exposing our soldiers to a deadly virus that could spread through the military or be brought back into the homeland. I'm just really stunned that they're doing this.
Well, I am too. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. But even if you said, okay, we'll put on hazmat suits and you will, there's just about zero chance of you contracting Ebola as long as you are diligent. That's not the point. The point is, this is not a military mission. The point is, you've abused our military. You've done nothing to take care of them. All you've done is made them a social experiment. You're suppressing the religious liberties of our young men and women, and at the same time, you're putting more pressure and more burdens on them. And that's I am so opposed to that I just can't explain.
General, last question before I let you go. Do you think what remains of patriotic America, are they going to find the inner strength to rise up and overcome this assault on liberty and take a stand and say, we're not going to allow this to go on anymore. We're going to save the republic?
I'm seeing signs that more and more Americans are waking up. I had a guy call me the other day, and this is what the guy said. He said, look, I'm a card-carrying Democrat, but tell me what I've got to do to get not only the president, but this whole administration out of there. So people are starting to wake up and realize that things are bad and they're getting worse, and that there's nothing that's going to change unless average Americans get involved and engaged. So I think they're starting to wake up, and I think if there's a groundswell of mainstream America really getting involved in what's going on, particularly getting involved in the political process and supporting candidates and voting, I think we can make a difference. We can change the direction of this country.
Well, we appreciate you being here today. My guest, retired Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin, now serving at the Family Research Council in Washington, D.C. Thank you, General.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.